So here's the thing. This was never actually supposed to happen. I wish that I could say that living on the road was something that I had always dreamed about, but it hasn't. To be honest with you, before I actually did leave home, I wasn't even sure that I really wanted to. You see, most of my traveling experience has been with friends or family, so the prospect of venturing out on my own across a border and thousands of miles from home just seemed impossible. I mean, at this point, I had never traveled solo, so I was scared. But I was fortunate enough to have a travel buddy, my Red Fox Lab, Archie. He helped pave the way for some of the best experiences we had, including visiting some old friends.
Thought I'd share this sunset with you.
Throughout my time on the road, I learned to see the beauty in the simplicity. Something as simple as a sunset or a watchtower in the forest is enough to just make you stop and stare. Even though our life was simple and we had a good routine going, we were still alone. Isolated. Out of contact with most of the outside world. And naturally, as things would go, we had a lot of issues.
It's been a heck of a day. Sunday, I got food poisoning. Well, I just had to cancel my hip camp because of flooding. I don't know how the hell this truck stayed up on four wheels. Slept like shit last night, not gonna lie to you. I don't know what the issue was, I just could not fall asleep. Holy shit.
But through all of it, we stayed persistent, stayed the course, and followed through on something that I never even thought was possible. Of course, naturally, I miss my friends and family, and I wanted to share these experiences with them. But the reality is, I just needed to get away. I needed to start over. This past year has been one that I will never forget. What started in a personal hellscape was capped in the most epic way possible. I've started new traditions and kept up some old ones. And I've found some of the most amazing hidden gems this country has to offer. This project is known as the Big Reset. Every aspect of my life reset at the beginning of 2022. I use this project as a way to not only reset what was going on in my personal life, but also as a reset for what I've been doing as a video professional. I've been unhappy with the direction of my work for a while now, and I wanted and needed that to change. This film is a culmination of the last 2 years of my life, preparing for and actually committing to living on the road. What started in the farm fields of central Pennsylvania ended up being one of the greatest experiences I'm likely ever going to have. I'm going to take you back through how I got here, what I did, and why I did it. Welcome to the Big Reset. Let me take you back to 2016. Gas was cheap, I had a real job, and I was always looking for something to do. Back then, I still had my Jeep, and I was doing some silly things. Kind of like this. Myself and 8 of my friends embarked on a cross-country Jeep trip we called the Limitless Jeep Tour.
And have you been on any other road trips with these guys before?
We've done a few road trips. I mean, the biggest one we did was down to Chaos, but that's not really like a road trip. That's like it's like 3.5 hour drive from where I am in Bel Air. we usually go, there's like 2 parks that are kind of close to us. We got Roush Creek up in Pennsylvania, that's like 2.5 from us, and then we got Chaos, which is over in West Virginia, about 3 or 3.5 hours, depending on how fast you drive it.
So here I was, driving on my first cross-country trip, and I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. But I tell you what, I sure did have a great time.
Wired. And it's
Did you get my good side?
Hell yeah, I did.
This trip taught me a lot of lessons, the first of which is that nothing ever goes according to plan. If you listen closely in this clip, that cracking you're hearing, that's Ford's winch snapping in half.
wait, pull you.
Alright.
But we were still having some fun. Then, later on, after we got out of that park, Greg's Jeep went into limp mode.
It's still grabbing? Is that what it's doing?
Yeah. When I went to change manually, it stayed in 3rd gear. It wouldn't come out of 3rd gear.
The check engine light wasn't on. So,
Well, check engine light wasn't on go when it showed the code for that.
yeah, it might be good to read those, to scan any codes again, see if it threw anything while you were driving it.
And all of that happened on day 1. This trip took place over a week. There's so much footage that I hope I can share in the future. We drove over 3,000 miles, traveling to every off-road park that we could find. When we got back though, I was tired, I was beat up, the shit was broken, but I was hooked. Unfortunately, that style of travel is insanely expensive, and I just couldn't keep justifying constantly breaking the vehicle I was driving to work every day. That is when I found out about overland.
Be a little easier, but I don't have that one.
Fast forward now to 2018. I've got a whole new set of friends I'm traveling with. I just quit my day job the week before because I'm not made for a cubicle, and we've got a 2-week trip planned to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. This is the first time sleeping in a tent in probably 15 years, and this is also my first real test as a solo outdoor filmmaker. Michigan was also my first real quote-unquote overlanding experience. To this day, this trip is still one of my favorites. I learned a ton from this trip too, from how to actually live out of a vehicle, what it's like looking for campsites, and also how to pace a trip so you have time to enjoy the things that you want to see. This trip also opened my eyes to the type of filmmaker that I wanted to be. It became clear to me that documentaries are really what I wanted to do. Problem was, I never made any time for it. Like I mentioned earlier, right before we left for that trip to Michigan, I quit my day job to pursue video full-time. It was simultaneously one of the best and stupidest decisions I have ever made. When I left that job, I didn't really have a lot of money saved up. I didn't really have projects or clients lined up. I honestly didn't really have a backup plan at all. My only focus when I left my job was that trip to Michigan. After we got back, though, the reality of the situation hit me, and, I had to find work to pay my rent, my bills, and pretty much everything. And unfortunately, that meant the Michigan project got put on hold. We still made trips happen, though, from our annual West Virginia winter bash to a couple trips out in Colorado to the beaches of North Carolina. Looking back now, I'm definitely glad that myself and my friends were able to capture all of these moments. There are a lot of moments that I have captured on film that I'm thankful that I get to relive. A lot happened between 2018 and 2022. I lived a bunch of different lives. The job that I left in 2018 was the host of a YouTube series, Rock's Garage. My job there was to show and demonstrate how to install the aftermarket parts that Red Hawk, the company that I work for, sold for golf carts. Yeah, you heard me, golf carts. It was actually a pretty fun job, believe it or not. Now, at the end of 2020, I sold my beloved Jeep and moved to a full-size truck, a Ram 1500, and over the course of time, I built it up with a Snap Outfitters camper system on the back of it. In July of 2020, I moved to Pennsylvania and bought a house with my girlfriend at the time. That, unfortunately, did not pan out, and eventually we drifted apart and split in December of 2021. There's a lot more to that story, but I'll leave it there. However, because of the sale of the house, I was left with a pretty sizable chunk of change. Just before the closing date of the house, I took a last-minute trip to Arkansas. I'm not going to lie to you, this is probably the lowest point of my life in recent memory. Here I was, on my 29th birthday, running from everything that was happening. Nick had invited me to the Ozarks, and I jumped at that chance. 5 days after we were supposed to return from the Ozarks, I was going to have to say goodbye to the house that I spent my life savings on. It was something that I was avoiding with every ounce of my being. So I ran off to the woods with my friends, and I honestly am really glad that I did that. While we were in the Ozarks, we made a point to slow down. The whole trip was centered around finding and taking pictures of waterfalls and waterways. Nick had actually purchased a book detailing the locations of a lot of these waterfalls. Something that's super cool and unique to this region is the limestone that turns the water a cool shade of blue. It was a unique aspect that I had not been anticipating, and it made for some really, really cool shots. After we left the Ozarks, it was time for me to go home and face what I really did not want to.
Let me see. What's out here?
Next was Cape Lookout, North Carolina, and the April 2022 trip was absolutely spectacular. As often as we can, a big group of us will ferry over to the island for a long weekend, typically about 4 or 5 days. We set up what has affectionately been dubbed as Shantytown, where we live on the beach for our time there. I met a lot of really great people that year, including Jake, who came along with my friend Shane. Jake would eventually live on the road with me for almost 6 weeks. Cape Lookout also served as my final major shakedown run for the rig. With everything working fully, I felt confident that the truck would perform well while I was out on the road. Back home, I prepared as much as I could for this trip. I researched as many routes, camping locations, gas stops, and activities as I could, but I was ultimately not sure I still wanted to actually leave home. But I knew I had to, for me. Finally, June 18th, 2022 came around. Packed my final things, said goodbye to my mom, and then got on the road with Archie. First, we hit Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania. This is an area that I've really wanted to explore for some time now. There's a lot of really cool stuff that runs throughout this forest, and I'd love to spend more time in there. We only spent one night here in ANF because our first major destination was going to be Madison, Wisconsin, where I would meet the aforementioned Jake, who's been living on his motorcycle for the last 2 years. On our way up to Michigan's Upper Peninsula, we stopped at Lambeau Field. Even though I never have been and never will be a Packers fan, it was really cool to see and feel the history there at Lambeau. After Lambeau, we headed north to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, specifically Copper Harbor. While we were there, we met and made some new friends and took some really cool epic shots. was really cool to see some of the same spots that I had been to years prior in a completely different season. However, the bugs and the ticks kept us relegated to the campgrounds that were on the water, which was totally fine with me and Archie. Archie even got to swim a little bit in Lake Superior.
Always got the sticks, Archie.
After about a week in the UP, Jake and I headed toward Duluth, where we would meet up with our friends Chris and John and cross the border into Canada.
Hey, friends!
Hi, friend!
Canada was an interesting experience for me. It was my first time outside of the US, and it felt like kind of a big deal at the time. I had a little snafu crossing the border and had to return some raw chicken to the United States by foot, but otherwise it was a pretty easy crossing. Once we crossed the border, though, it was smooth sailing up to Sioux Falls Provincial Park, and we were able to snag this huge campsite right down on the water. We also found out that Canada was experiencing some pretty serious flooding at the time, which came into play later on in the trip. Now, the entire reason we decided to go to Canada was so that Chris could go to the Mission Overland headquarters in Winnipeg to get work done on his trailer. But since that ended up taking way longer than expected, John and I went out and did some exploring. Some of these trails were so tight that even the Land Rover didn't fit, but I tell you, it was nice to get the tires muddy after spending so much time on the highway. As always, I try to experience the local food and drink options that a place has, and Canada was no different. And while our friends were back at home celebrating American Independence Day, we were outside drinking beer and eating pizza with Canadians. After this, though, everyone had to go back to the US, and I continued on my way across the country and away from my responsibilities. On my way across, I stopped at several Airbnbs or hip camps, and I met some of the most amazing hosts and guests along the way. Now, like I mentioned before, Canada was experiencing a pretty significant period of flooding, and it was around this time that it really started to affect what I was doing.
Well, I just had to cancel my hip camp because of flooding. So that sucks, but I think I'm still going to go west to Calgary and see what happens. Yeah, this is kind of what this is all about. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do it. So, all I know is I'm going towards Calgary tomorrow. We'll see what happens.
It is hailing.
Right on the water. I don't know if you can see it or not, but way out there, you can see the mountains.
Looking back on this portion of the trip, I really wish I had made more time to explore this area of Canada. At this point in the trip, though, I needed to head down to Oregon to pick up some gear to shoot content on. I'm really bummed that I didn't get to spend more time here in the Canadian Rockies since it's such a beautiful area. But it is what it is, and I made my way to Bend, Oregon.
That's pretty much every morning around here. It's Friday, July 15th, and I am outside of Bend, Oregon. I've been spending like the last week or so, I guess, maybe like 5 days in the town of Oregon, or in the town of Sisters, which is like 20 minutes up the road, hanging out in the national forest, just kind of, taking some time off and relaxing. We've been driving a shit ton, so I decided to just kind of take a couple days off and explore around the town of Bend a little bit. Today, we start to head up to Mount Hood. So I start my big loop, my big Pacific Northwest loop. So that starts today. I gotta finish my coffee, gotta finish packing everything up. We got in late last night, and then we're gonna head up towards Mount Hood. We got a spot that's like 2 hours from here. So we'll see how it goes. Been my last 6 weeks inside my truck. It's been fun.
My first initial stint in Oregon was one of the highlights of the entire trip. I met up with my buddy Oliver briefly, and he gave me some locations for some absolutely stellar campsites. While I was out there, I found myself creating content simply for the joy of it again. I mean, that's not hard with landscapes like this, but just tossing my drone up in the air was just fun. I also found out that I could shoot night lapses on my GoPro. I changed a couple settings and now I can get a perfect night lapse with just one button press. There's just something so mesmerizing to me about watching the night sky roll by or spin by. Clouds rolling through the sky, or even planets or galaxies as we pass by. It's always a reminder of how small and fragile we really are. And on July 28th, I was given a very abrupt reminder on how quickly it could all go away.
Last 48 hours in the state of Washington haven't exactly been good to me. I woke up at about 5 a.m. With food poisoning. I don't know where I got it, I don't know how I got it, but then once I got that sorted out, I headed over to Mount Rainier National Forest. Going up into Rainier National Forest, you go through the town of Carbonado, and basically once you hit Carbonado, there is literally zero cell service all the way up, as far up the trails as you can go. But as I was going up, another driver was coming down from the trailhead. I was going uphill, this driver was coming downhill, and they did not yield to me at all. They did not move over on the trail at all. So I had to go over, and I made the bad decision to go over towards the shoulder. And then after a few failed self-recovery attempts, I actually made it worse. So I had to leave my truck in the National Forest overnight, which is not something that I wanted to do, but I really didn't have any other options. So after I found out that State Farm and Ajero were no longer going to be able to help me, I contacted some local guys, specifically a group called the Washington Off-Road Recovery Network. I can't thank these guys enough. I mean, these guys dropped everything for some random dude on the internet that needed help. So first of all, I gotta say thank you to Isaac, Zach, and Cam. You guys, seriously, you saved my ass, quite literally. All of the weight, well, the majority of the weight is on the passenger side of the vehicle, which is the side that was downhill. I'll put up some pictures so that you can see what predicament I was in. This was a seriously impressive recovery. The truck was sitting at, we measured on the back bumper, the truck was sitting at 31 degrees. The Power Wagon, the 2500 Power Wagon, has a tip over point of 31 degrees. I don't know how the hell this truck stayed up on four wheels. I am amazed that this thing did not fall over, it did not roll down the hill. To make the recovery, what we ended up doing was we had another Ram 1500 behind me, and we had a 4Runner in front of me. What we did then is we took some tree saver straps and some snatch blocks and tied to some trees up on the hill to change the direction of the pull to straight back up onto the road. So we attempted to do that a couple times. but the truck was so heavy that it was quite literally pulling the Ram 1500 uphill and the 4Runner downhill. So we had the 4Runner with the winch, and behind the 4Runner was a Lexus GX 470 with a tow strap, and behind the Lexus was a Ford F250 tied to the back of the Lexus. And then behind me, we had that Ram 1500, and then we had a Chevy 2500 tied to the back of that to keep it from getting pulled uphill. From there, we pretty much just had to brute force it back up a couple more feet back up onto the road. And then once we got it back up onto the road, with the winches still attached, I was able to get back in it, put it in four-wheel drive, and give the winches a little bit of an assist to get back up onto the road. But everything is okay, we are okay, truck's okay, Archie's okay, and everything is still going. And we're gonna keep on keeping on. So, I don't know when the next time is that you guys will see me, probably on the beach. I have some videos I need to shoot while I'm out there for some jobs, but the beach will probably be the next time you guys see me. So until then,
honestly, at this point of the trip, I was considering heading home permanently. I was stressed about everything at this point. I mean, money, locations, the truck, just everything. Fortunately, 3 days of beach camping turned that attitude right around. Coos Bay was a pretty unique experience. Behind the dunes, you can rip UTVs around, and there's some trails and campsites back there as well. If you take one of the 2 or 3 pass-throughs, though, you can drive literally on the coast. And that's exactly what Oliver and I did. The weather here was pretty gnarly. I mean, keep in mind that this was the beginning of August. It was like 65 degrees. Bend, which was in the same state but like a couple hours away, was around 95 degrees at the same time. Fortunately though, the clouds did clear just enough for me to capture one last amazing sunset on the west coast. After Coos Bay, it was time for me to start heading home for a little while, as I had some weddings to attend and some other things to take care of. On the way back, though, I stopped in Colorado to hang out with my friends Brooke and Gus, who we met in Michigan. Gus was a great friend and play buddy for Archie, while for me, it was nice to have another human to talk to. Brooke has a crazy skill of being able to find some great free campsites. The spots she picked for us while we were in Colorado were some of the best of my entire time on the road. This is one of those spots. This is Twin Lakes, Colorado, and this was probably my top campsite from the entire trip. We were able to swim here, we were able to play here. It was just a great time. Brooke is also a damn good traveling wedding photographer. While we were out, she took some of my favorite pictures of me and Archie. I'm sure you've seen them around because I share them all the time. The brief time we spent in Colorado was not enough. I really wish we could have spent more time out there, but with all the rain coming through and the weddings I needed to be back for, it was time for me to head home to Maryland. Being home for several weeks was a good reset and refocus for me. I was home for about 6 weeks to go to a bachelor party and to be the best man in the wedding for my best friend. Also took some photos for another friend's wedding and they turned out really good. Also, while I was home, I made some time to go fishing a few times. Once here in Maryland for some snakeheads, which are delicious, by the way, if you've never had them. And then once up to Pulaski, New York for some salmon. I also finished up my arm tattoo sleeve while I was home as well. Sorry, Mom. But once the fall and October rolled around, it was time for me to hit the road again. This time, I headed north to visit Chris for a week at his house in Massachusetts.
This is like $200 worth of tuna sitting here.
Probably more than that. So, I mean, this is bluefin. Typically, you'll see yellowfin. Bluefin's the more just like, I don't know, how do I say it? Higher end, but this is like the super fatty meat. So this is something that like we pay big money for here in the States. Over in Japan, they probably prefer the leaner stuff, but it's yummy.
One of the ways my friends and I show off for each other is through food, and Chris is no exception to that.
Archie, back up, dude.
He caught and processed this tuna himself, something he does a lot in the warmer months of the year. He goes fishing off the coast with his father-in-law a lot. Pretty much every time I see Chris now, it involves fresh tuna in some way. I spent about a week with Chris and his wife Kaylee doing all sorts of fall New England things. Chris and I went to go get some raw oysters one day from a local oyster farm, and I also got to meet Chris's parents, who owned Lily, Archie's older sister. Archie was from the second litter from his parents, and Lily was from the first. It's really incredible to see how much they look and act like each other. Even though it was kind of out of the way, after I left Chris's house, I headed out to Cape Cod because, well, frankly, I wanted to see the ocean and be in the sand, but also because I wanted to say that I had been to Cape Cod. Archie loves running and playing in the sand too, so I figured it would just be a good day for both of us.
What do you think, bud? Yeah, we don't want that. That's seaweed. That's seaweed. That's not stick. Hey! I don't know if you can hear a goddamn thing I'm saying, but I'm at Cape Lookout. We're not Cape Lookout. That's not right. Cape Cod National Seashore. Out here. Archie's out here. Running around enjoying the water. Just wanted to stop by the beach today. So I did. What do you think of the beach, bud? Huh? Stay back here, bud. Hey, Archie. So happy.
This is so fucked. I don't know if this is gonna help at all. Good morning, beautiful people. We're in New Hampshire. This is what we do pretty much every morning. Got the sleeping platform back here. Fold that down. Comes up. And then I can stand up and get ready with Archie. It's one of my favorite features about this camper. One of my things that I do while I'm traveling is trying new coffee. It doesn't matter really if it's a new bean, new style, new brewing method, whatever. I just experiment with coffee a lot while I'm traveling. And here I'm using this jet oil French press
It goes right through the
attachment.
lid, so I don't even have to get another thing out to make coffee. Literally, I just use the same thing I heat the water up in. It's great. And it acts like a French press, which means the coffee tastes good too. But yeah, so the attachment literally just goes, the little handle goes through the little hole that's on the top of the jet boil lid. And then this little strainer screws right on the end of that and just goes right on the top of your jet boil. On a hike with Archie here. And wow. Needed to take a little bit of a walk today. Today didn't go so hot. One of the hardest things right now for me is consistent internet. I'm finding places where I have like a single bar, but even going to places like Starbucks or, you know, Burger King or whatever for Wi-Fi just doesn't work. Their Wi-Fi is just way too slow. I tried to download about 10 gigs of footage earlier today, and the fastest Wi-Fi I was able to find around here was 7 megabits per second download. So it would have taken hours to download that 10 gigs worth of footage. It's just, today was frustrating. I spent 4 hours in town for absolutely nothing. But when I got views like this, troubles seem to fade away.
So now, at this point in the trip, I've got a lot going on. I'm trying and failing to create content for 2 different brands while I'm on the road. I've got a serious lack of internet to do those jobs, and I'm bleeding money because I don't have consistent work. Plus, I'm having truck issues too. So what did I choose to do as a solution? I ignored all of that and went to beat the living piss out of my truck in the woods with my friends. So my friend Brandon and his dad asked me to run the Trans-New Hampshire Expedition with them, which is a scenic route that takes you from the Canadian border crossing in New Hampshire through 3 days of sightseeing throughout the state. I was particularly excited about this as I hadn't really been wheeling in a while, and I also hadn't seen Brandon in almost 3 years. This is exactly the type of travel that I built the truck for, so it was nice to have somebody else around to make sure that I got out. Plus, the last little bit of fall foliage was still hanging on for us to check out.
That's for sure. I mean, it's Trans-New Hampshire. Might as well start at the top. Trans-New Hampshire Expedition Day 1. Here we go. Alright, so I'm currently in New Hampshire. What you just saw was me and my friend Brandon and his dad out at the Canadian border crossing in New Hampshire. We are running what's known as the Trans-New Hampshire Expedition. This is a track that was purchased online, and it's basically a scenic route through the entirety of New Hampshire. There's all kinds of waypoints and like shit to see along the route, so take you along for the journey.
Going into this trek, I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know what the waypoints were about or really what there was to see in New Hampshire. But I've got to give huge props to the makers of the THNE. They did a really good job of keeping things interesting. There's a lot of really cool waterfall-based historical sites up there in New Hampshire.
First waypoint on the trip, Garfield Falls. Oh nice, stairs. Easy, Arch. Holy shit. Whoa. I'm totally gonna slip and die. It's like a little pool down there. Oh, dude, that's cool. Look at that. I don't mind, bud. I don't mind. Wow, man. Holy shit. I'll let you get a bath. You probably need it. You getting your fetch in, bud? Ah! Got it. Good boy, Arch. Did you get the stick? It smells like a wet dog in here, Archie. Yellow pine trees. You know? Buddy. Oh, that's cool. That's real cool.
While a lot of this track was on pavement, there was still a lot of really cool stuff to see, and I was actually really excited about it. One of the things that stood out to me was how rocky and mountainous this area was. The East Coast gets a lot of flack for not being as cool as the West, but personally I think that people just don't know where to look. Now, a huge part of day one was going through a bunch of covered bridges. Not typically my thing, but it was pretty cool to see these nice little spots. Plus, we got really lucky with the weather on day one. It was sunny and it was pretty dry for most of the day, which really helped that last little bit of that color pop through. Yeah, dude, look at that.
That's ridiculous. Look at the breakthrough.
Right? I mean, you gotta stop hundreds of thousands of pounds, so you gotta have a lot. Dang, look at that. Look at those leaf springs, man. Searing that one. Bugs everywhere, man. Day two, and we are just north of Conway, New Hampshire, getting ready to start the second leg of the Trans-New Hampshire expedition. First day was pretty good. I'm actually pretty impressed with this track so far. Pretty much the whole first half of day one was on dirt. It wasn't really like, you know, technical off-roading or anything. I mean, this is a stock-friendly trip, but it was, you know, it was forest roads. There were spots where we had to drive a little bit slow. I mean, technically my truck is stock, so, you know, I'll be able to do this whole thing. Today we're basically going, we got all the way over to the east side today, or yesterday, and then we're gonna go all the way basically back across and down a little bit over to the west side of the state. So I'm kind of excited to see what's on the map for today. We've got all kinds of different waypoints and stuff, so kind of excited to see what today's got in store.
Yeah, from what I can see, our best bet's just going to be to go back the exact way that we came, because it looks like this trail leads off in the opposite direction. You see the same thing?
Yeah, I'm seeing that. So
Day 2 had a bunch of really cool sights to see. Because we were taking our time from the day before, we missed 2 of the waypoints from day 1, so we went back to hit those. The first of which was Diana's Baths. Located in Bartlett, Diana's Baths are along Lucy Brook, which is fed from the Big Attitash Mountain. In the 1860s, George Lucy, the original property owner, built a water wheels-powered sawmill. Then, in the 1930s, Chester Lucy, his son, built a concrete dam with water feed and turbine system to replace the water wheel used to power the sawmill. It's really pretty crazy that they were able to do this stuff without modern technology. After Diana's Baths, we hit Cathedral Ledge, which was a little underwhelming with all the fog, but it was still really cool to see out over everything. You can actually see the top as you drive up the really long and very steep road. It's apparently a pretty popular climbing destination as well.
Alright, so we just left Cathedral Ledge, and before that we went to Diana's Baths. And those were the last 2 remaining spots we had for today, or from yesterday rather. So now we're gonna get to the start of, technically, the start of day 2. This hill has got a ridiculous grade to it, so I need to make sure that I am in low range and stay that way. Nobody in here, alright, cool.
Our next destination was Rocky Gorge, but on the way over, we stopped by another covered bridge. And, you know, of course I took advantage of the photo opportunity. Now, Rocky Gorge was carved by glacier melt about 10,000 years ago, according to the signs. This river and gorge in particular have a constant stream of water even during the winter and droughts. Based on what I've seen though, this water level here in this gorge is actually pretty low. We also made our way up to Sabaday Falls, which is a unique waterfall that makes a 90-degree turn because of a fault that runs through the site. Again, at least that's what the sign says.
Alright, so that's the end of day 2. We actually ended up having to get a hip camp, which is apparently somebody's cabin construction site. But we got a hip camp. Brandon and his dad are down in town looking for snacks. Day 2 was a lot of pavement. Pretty much the entire route was pavement, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but you know, obviously dirt is more fun. But today was mostly pavement, which was a little bit of a disappointment. And it also rained pretty much all day, which, you know, isn't so bad. I don't mind the rain. I actually kind of like the rain, but it did make for, you know, make everything real wet and muddy and everything. Something to keep in mind if you're going to be running this route is after Columbus Day, pretty much everything that's on this route and that's on the maps is closed. All of the campgrounds that we've tried to go to, everything that's on this route pretty much is closed. Even the museum we went to today, everything's been closed. But while Brandon and his dad are down in town, I'm gonna make myself a little snack because I'm hungry, very hungry. Make some hot stickers and ramen. Also, this is what I mean about everything just being dirty. Like, this is just from 1 or 2 times of Archie getting up and down. That's ridiculous.
Day 3 started out seemingly easy, but we knew it was going to be a relatively difficult day. According to the track, we had 141 miles to drive that day. We hit dirt pretty quickly though, and that was pretty exciting for us. However, I had no idea what we were in for with these Class 6 roads. New Hampshire had a very wet fall, and a lot of these trails were rutted out or flooded, which I did not know going into this.
Holy shit. Got a little water on my my radiator. It's steaming on me.
Damn, dude. That was not expected.
I don't know if we just took the wrong side of that, but that was deep, man. That went up over your hood.
Did you get it on video?
I did, yeah.
This track is labeled as a stock-friendly route, but these Class 6 roads make me hesitant to agree with that. I think if your vehicle is still on stock suspension, you better be ready for some pinstriping and bumps and scrapes on your truck's underside.
It looks like it went all the way up to this seam, almost.
Yeah, of like actual like immersion.
Yeah.
Splash.
But she's handling it, which is nice.
Those big stones right in the middle, dude, those are rough. Yeah.
I hit, luckily, you know, I had that front skid plate. That's why we have rock steps.
This is one of those points that made me question that label. We were supposed to turn up this road here, and frankly, I'm glad we didn't. I'm honestly not sure my truck would have made it up.
You do have to come back over this, though. You can't just keep swinging it.
That's fucking gnarly, man. It doesn't look like much, but that's like a, you know, a good 18-inch drop off over there on the right side. Short wheelbase for the win. So we just got to our campground here in Vermont, and that's going to do it for the Trans-New Hampshire expedition route. I had a lot of fun doing this. I was different from what I usually do, but like I said, had a lot of fun doing it. Got to wheel the truck pretty hard, got to put the truck in some situations I probably wouldn't have otherwise put it into, and it performed great. And as far as like the camping setup goes and everything, it's so dialed right now that like I'm really happy with the way that this thing's going. We're going a little bit further north, and I will see you guys when I get to wherever I'm getting to.
I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't have a lot of content from this point in the trip. After Brandon and his dad went home, I met back up with Brooke and Gus up in Vermont. Brooke had never really spent any time out on the East Coast, so she came out to hang out with us. We spent most of our time at this one campsite, but I really used this time to unwind and get away from the internal pressure of creating all of this content. I spent as much time as I could doing the things that I like, like spending time flying my drones, and I was even able to break the FPV out for a little bit for the first time on the trip. The original intent for us to meet up in Vermont was to eventually travel up to Maine, which we actually did, but we were supposed to do a mock elopement shoot for both of our portfolios with a couple in one of the parks that was up there, but right before that was going to happen, the weather took a turn and we got like 6 inches of snow overnight. We ended up having to cancel that shoot and then just headed south because of the weather. Honestly, at this point, both myself and Brooke were so hooked on the idea of living on the road that we were doing whatever we could to stay traveling. I mean, personally, I was putting things on credit cards, applying for online jobs, anything I could do to keep the train rolling. Fortunately for us, Brooke found another really great free campsite in Santee National Preserve that ended up being home for like 3 weeks. We bopped around a little bit and saw Charleston and Myrtle Beach while we were in the area, but mostly just kind of hung out at the campsite and tried to work and make money as much as we could.
Hello, hello. We are in South Carolina now. I'm in Santee National Preserve, I believe is how it's pronounced. It's basically right on the coast of South Carolina. And we were gonna do a mock elopement shoot, but it just didn't end up working out. The weather turned to shit, the park's closed, Brooke was having issues with the electrical system in her van, and we just didn't want to be in the cold weather anymore, because fuck that. We did have an incident that happened in Green Mountain National Forest that I thought you guys might like to hear about. So Brooke and I stayed at this kind of established national forest campground in Green Mountain National Forest. It was on the north side of Green Mountain National Forest, and we were there for 5 days. And on the second or third day, a gentleman named Jay was driving up the trail, and I flagged him down because I thought his truck was really cool. He had a red Tacoma that looked like it was built really, really well, and it had the Alucab cabin on the back of it, and I was just really curious about that system. So I flagged him down and I started talking to him, and then he went up the hill a little bit on his way and got to his campsite, which was on the hill just above us. The next day, Jay told us he was going to go down into town, so we were kind of keeping an eye on stuff that was going in and out, and I noticed that there was a car that drove up the path or up the road, and I knew that both of the camp spots that were above us on the road were occupied. So basically anybody who was going to drive up there was going to end up going all the way up there, realizing that there was no campsites open, and turning around and come back. It would take him maybe 5-10 minutes to get up there. Well, I saw this car or SUV go up, and it took a while for them to come back down, probably a good half hour, 45 minutes. And I started to get a little bit of a funny feeling. So I was sitting on the back of my truck, and I turned to my left and I looked up the hill, and I saw the vehicle sitting in Jay's campsite. So the only thing that I could think to do was to put the drone up in the air and see if I could see what these people are doing. Now, it was a really windy day, so I don't think that they were able to hear the drone, but I didn't really get all that close to them. But something that happened when I put the drone up in the air is it was clear as day that they were putting Jay's camping gear, his stove, his chairs, they even took his dirty dishes. They put all that stuff in the back of their truck. I watched them on video put it in the back of their truck. So after I saw that happen, I made sure that I got their license plate number on the way down, and I had to do the unfortunate thing of letting Jay know that all of his stuff got stolen while he was down in town. Now, Jay handled that better than I probably would have. I probably would have freaked out. I would have been so upset, but he was kind of like, it is what it is. It's camping stuff. It can be replaced. Luckily, nobody was hurt. But I gave him all the information that I had, and I honestly thought, and so did he, that once he reported it to the police that, pretty much nothing was going to happen. So I invited Jay to stay with us at our campsite that night, and he did, and then he got up and, well, actually we all got up the next morning, and we had some breakfast, we made some coffee, we chatted a little bit more, and then Jay headed on his way back home for the weekend. Not even 10 minutes later, I saw him walking back up the street, and he goes, "Man, you are not gonna believe this." As it turns out, the people that stole his stuff were camped 2 campsites down the road. And since we had the license plate number and the vehicle description and everything, Jay went and approached them and demanded his stuff back. Now, luckily for him, that kind of went by without an incident, and he got all of his stuff back. But it was just really kind of, in my opinion, hilarious to see someone do something so stupid.
Like, I don't understand how you would think that that was a good idea. Maybe hiding in plain sight was the idea, but it was ridiculous. So that was probably the most entertaining part of Vermont for me. That was like the most exciting day. Otherwise, we kind of just sat at that camp spot. I mean, I went to the Alchemist Brewing and got a bunch of beer. I got, some Heady Topper, and I got some Focal Banger, which I like better than Heady Topper. But so now we are in South Carolina. We are in Santee National Preserve, and the weather, as you can see, I am wearing short sleeve shirts. It's like 60 degrees right now. It's a little humid just because it was, raining and everything earlier, but, I'm sleeping with just a blanket at night instead of my minus 25 degree sleeping bag. The only downside of right now is it's a little warm and kind of buggy. Didn't miss the mosquitoes. We're gonna hang out here for a while, and then I'm heading back kind of middle of December, like December 10th. I'm gonna end up heading back home, and then I'll be there through the end of the year, and then I will head down to the Southwest. Morning. Morning, peoples. Eventually, my time on the road had to come to an end, and in mid-December, I headed back home to be with family for the holidays. Spoiler alert, that Southwest trip never happened, and my time living on the road full-time came to an end at the end of 2022. I'm not gonna lie to you, I was not particularly happy with the way that I ended my travels. I still want and need to travel more. I still want and need to do long-term camping trips. However, my ability to do that full-time was over. Since I've been back home, I've made the conscious decision to get out and spend more time with my friends, spend more time outdoors. I've also made the point to travel and explore more locally to me on the East Coast. I still travel and camp for days or weeks at a time whenever I can. 2023 was filled with all sorts of trips that allowed me to spend more time with the people that I care most about. The big reset wasn't a one-time thing. It was the impetus for something bigger, something better, something continuous. As I look towards the new year, I'm excited for things on the horizon, but I'm also glad that I've healed and I've learned how to slow down and enjoy the moments that are happening